Welcome back to our mythological journey through the ancient world. Have you ever wondered how the mighty Zeus, king of all gods, rose from a helpless infant hidden in a cave to become the most powerful deity in Greek mythology? Tonight, we'll uncover the incredible tale of betrayal, prophecy, and divine warfare that shaped the very foundations of Mount Olympus. So let's hear this. In the beginning, when the world was young and the very concept of time had barely taken root, there existed an age of unimaginable prosperity known as the Golden Age. This was a time when the earth yielded its bounty without the need for toil, when humans lived in harmony with nature, and when death came only as a gentle sleep after centuries of peaceful existence. Ruling over this paradise was Kronos, the youngest and most cunning of the Titans, who had seized power through an act that would forever define his reign. Kronos had not always been king. His father, Uranus, the personification of the sky itself, had ruled with an iron fist, imprisoning his own children deep within the earth's womb, Gaia. The earth goddess had suffered immensely, feeling every one of her children trapped within her, their weight and anguish causing her unbearable pain. In her desperation, she had crafted a great sickle from the hardest adamant and pleaded with her children to free themselves and their siblings from their father's tyranny. Only Kronos had possessed the courage and ruthlessness necessary for such a deed. When Uranus descended to embrace Gaia, as was his nightly custom, Kronos emerged from his hiding place with the divine sickle gleaming in his hand. With one swift, decisive stroke, he castrated his father, forever ending Uranus's ability to create new life and seizing the throne of the cosmos for himself. The blood that fell from Uranus's wound gave birth to the Furies, the Giants, and the Meliae, while his severed member, cast into the sea, would eventually give rise to Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty. With Uranus defeated and banished to the far reaches of the sky, Kronos freed his siblings from their earthen prison and established himself as the supreme ruler of the universe. He took his sister Rhea as his queen, and together they presided over an era of unprecedented peace and abundance. The Golden Age flourished under their rule, with humanity living in a state of innocence and joy that would never again be matched in the history of the world. Yet, even as Kronos enjoyed the fruits of his victory, a shadow began to grow in his heart. The very act that had brought him to power haunted his thoughts, for he knew that if a son could overthrow his father, then he too might one day face the same fate. This fear, small at first, began to consume him, transforming the once noble Titan into a paranoid tyrant who saw threats in every corner of his domain. The irony was not lost on Gaia, who watched her son's transformation with growing concern. She had hoped that Kronos would prove to be a more benevolent ruler than Uranus, but power, it seemed, had a way of corrupting even the most well-intentioned hearts. The Earth Goddess began to sense that another change was coming, another shift in the cosmic order that would once again reshape the very foundations of existence. As Kronos' paranoia deepened, he began to seek out prophecies and omens, desperate to know what the future held for his reign. He consulted with the ancient oracles, studied the movements of the stars, and delved into the mysteries of fate itself. What he discovered would shatter his peace forever and set in motion a chain of events that would ultimately lead to his own downfall. The Golden Age continued to shine brightly on the surface, but beneath the veneer of prosperity and peace, dark currents were beginning to stir. Kronos' growing obsession with maintaining his power would soon lead him down a path of unthinkable horror, one that would pit him against his own children and ultimately bring about the very fate he sought so desperately to avoid. The Oracle's cave lay hidden deep within the sacred mountain of Delphi, where the earth's breath rose in mysterious vapors and the voice of fate itself could be heard by those brave enough to seek it. Kronos approached this hallowed place with a mixture of determination and dread, his golden crown heavy upon his brow as he descended into the shadowy depths where prophecy dwelt. The Titan King had ruled for countless years, yet the gnawing fear in his heart had grown too powerful to ignore any longer. The Pythia, ancient beyond measure and wise in the ways of destiny, sat upon her sacred tripod as the intoxicating fumes swirled around her. Her eyes, milky white with age and divine sight, seemed to look through Kronos rather than at him. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of cosmic truth, each word falling like stones into the silence of the sacred chamber. "Great Kronos, Lord of time and harvest, you come seeking knowledge of your fate," the oracle intoned, her voice echoing strangely in the confined space. "But know this, mighty Titan, some truths are too terrible to bear, and some destinies too powerful to change." Kronos stepped forward, his massive frame casting long shadows on the cave walls. "Speak, Oracle, I must know what threatens my reign. I have ruled justly and brought prosperity to all creation. Surely the fates smile upon my continued rule." The Pythia's laugh was like the sound of autumn leaves rustling in a cold wind. "Justice, you say? Tell me, King of the Titans, was it justice that drove you to raise the adamant sickle against your own father? Was it justice that spilled divine blood upon the earth and cast Uranus into eternal exile? The Titan's jaw clenched, but he remained silent. The oracle continued, her voice growing stronger as the prophetic trance took hold of her completely. "You fear what you yourself have done, Kronos. You fear that as you overthrew your father, so too shall you be overthrown, and in this fear you speak truly." "Tell me plainly," Kronos demanded, his voice thundering through the cave. "What does fate decree for my kingdom?" The oracle's head tilted back, and when she spoke again, her words carried the inexorable weight of destiny itself. "One of your own children shall rise against you, mighty Kronos. A son born of your blood and Rhea's love shall cast you down from your throne, just as you cast down Uranus before you. He shall be mightier than you, wiser than you, and more beloved by gods and mortals alike. Your golden reign shall end in thunder and lightning, and a new age shall dawn under his rule." The words hit Kronos like physical blows, each syllable driving deeper into his heart. He staggered backward, his face pale with shock and growing rage. "No," he whispered, then louder, "No, I will not allow it. I am Kronos, Lord of Time itself. I control destiny." But the oracle was not finished. Her voice rose to a wail that seemed to come from the very depths of the earth. "You cannot escape what is written in the stars, Titan King. The child is already conceived, growing even now within Rhea's womb. Your firstborn shall be the instrument of your doom, unless—" "Unless what?" Kronos seized upon this glimmer of hope, leaning forward desperately. "Unless the child never draws breath, never grows to challenge you. But know this, Kronos, in seeking to avoid your fate, you may well ensure it comes to pass. The threads of destiny are not easily cut, and those who try often find themselves entangled beyond escape." Kronos left the oracle's cave with his mind reeling, the prophecy burning in his thoughts like a brand. As he emerged into the sunlight, the beauty of his golden kingdom seemed suddenly fragile, temporary. Every flower that bloomed, every child that laughed, every moment of peace and prosperity now felt like sand slipping through his fingers. The journey back to his palace passed in a blur of dark contemplation. By the time he reached his throne room, where Rhea waited with her gentle smile and loving eyes, Kronos had already begun to formulate a plan. It was a terrible plan, one that would require him to commit acts that went against every natural instinct, but the alternative, losing his power, facing the same fate he had inflicted upon his father, was unthinkable. As Rhea approached him, her hand resting protectively over her swelling belly, Kronos felt his heart break even as his resolve hardened. The prophecy had given him knowledge, and knowledge, he believed, was power. He would use that power to protect his throne, no matter the cost. The great hall of Kronos' palace had once echoed with laughter and celebration, but now it bore witness to an act so monstrous that even the marble columns seemed to weep. Rhea's cries of labor had filled the air for hours, and when they finally ceased, replaced by the sweet sound of a newborn's first breath, Kronos felt no joy, only the cold grip of destiny tightening around his throat. "My lord," the attending nymph whispered, her voice trembling as she approached the throne where Kronos sat rigid with tension. "The child is born, a daughter, healthy and beautiful. The queen asks for you to come and—" "Bring the child to me," Kronos commanded, his voice cutting through the nymph's words like a blade. "Now!" The nymph's face paled, but she dared not disobey. Within moments, she returned, carrying a bundle of soft cloth that contained Kronos' firstborn daughter. The infant was indeed beautiful, with perfect features and skin that seemed to glow with divine light. Her tiny fingers grasped at the air, and her eyes, already showing the wisdom that marked her as a goddess, gazed up at her father with innocent trust. Rhea appeared in the doorway, still weak from childbirth, but radiant with maternal joy. "Kronos, come see our daughter. She's perfect, absolutely perfect. We should name her." Her words died in her throat as she saw her husband's expression. There was no love in his eyes, no paternal pride or wonder. Instead, there was something cold and terrible, a look she had never seen before in all their eons together. "Kronos?" she whispered, taking a hesitant step forward. "What's wrong? Why do you look at our child that way?" Without warning, Kronos rose from his throne and took the infant from the trembling nymph. The baby gurgled softly, still trusting, still innocent of what was about to happen. Rhea watched in growing horror as her husband's massive hands engulfed their daughter completely. "The oracle has spoken," Kronos said, his voice hollow and distant. "One of my children will overthrow me just as I overthrew my father. I will not allow that to happen." "Kronos, no!" Rhea screamed, lunging forward, but it was too late. In one swift, terrible motion, Kronos opened his mouth and swallowed his daughter whole. The infant's cry was cut short, muffled, and then gone forever. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by Rhea's anguished sobs as she collapsed to the marble floor. "You monster!" she wailed, beating her fists against the cold stone. "She was innocent! She was our child!" Kronos stood unmoved, though something deep within his eyes suggested that the act had cost him more than he would ever admit. "She was a threat to the cosmic order," he said mechanically. The prophecy was clear. This was the only way. But the horror was far from over. As the years passed and Rhea bore more children, the terrible ritual repeated itself. Each birth brought the same sequence of events, Rhea's joy turning to terror, her desperate pleas falling on deaf ears, and Kronos consuming his offspring with the methodical efficiency of a force of nature. Hestia, goddess of the hearth, was the first to disappear into her father's maw. Then came Demeter, who would have brought abundance to the earth. Hera followed, her regal bearing evident even in infancy. Finally, Hades was born, dark-haired and solemn, and he too vanished into the terrible darkness of his father's throat. With each child devoured, Rhea's heart broke a little more. The palace that had once been filled with love and laughter became a place of mourning and dread. The queen withdrew into herself, speaking little, eating less, her once bright eyes now dull with grief and barely contained rage. The other titans watched these events with growing unease. Some whispered among themselves, questioning whether their king had gone mad with power. Others, remembering their own father's cruelty, wondered if this was simply the way of things, if power inevitably corrupted those who wielded it, turning them into monsters who devoured their own legacy. Kronos himself seemed to age with each terrible act, though titans were supposed to be eternal and unchanging. Lines appeared on his face that had not been there before, and his golden hair began to show streaks of silver. He told himself that he was protecting the cosmic order, that his actions were necessary for the greater good. But in the dark hours of the night, when sleep eluded him, he could hear the echoes of his children's cries. The prophecy that had driven him to these desperate measures continued to haunt his thoughts. The oracle had warned him that in seeking to avoid his fate, he might ensure it came to pass. But what choice did he have? To allow his children to live was to invite his own destruction. To devour them was to preserve the golden age, to maintain the peace and prosperity that had flourished under his rule. Yet as Rhea prepared to give birth once more, Kronos could not shake the feeling that something was different this time. There was a determination in his wife's eyes that had not been there before, a quiet strength that spoke of plans being made in the shadows. The Titan King tightened his grip on power, but he could not escape the growing certainty that the threads of fate were already beginning to weave themselves into a pattern beyond his control. The palace of Kronos had become a tomb of silence, its once golden halls now echoing with nothing but the hollow footsteps of servants who dared not speak above a whisper. Rhea, queen of the Titans and wife to the most powerful being in existence, wandered these corridors like a ghost haunting her own life. Her eyes, once bright with the joy of motherhood, now held the hollow stare of a woman who had watched her world crumble with each passing birth. 5 times she had felt the divine spark of life growing within her immortal womb. 5 times she had endured the sacred agony of bringing forth a god into the world, and 5 times she had watched in helpless horror as Kronos, her beloved husband and the father of her children, had torn those precious lives from her arms and devoured them whole. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon. Each name was carved into her heart like a wound that would never heal, each memory a dagger that twisted deeper with every breath she took. The other titans whispered that she had grown mad with grief, and perhaps they were right. How else could one explain the way she spoke to empty rooms, calling out the names of children who existed now only in the darkness of their father's belly? How else could one understand the way she clutched at shadows, reaching for embraces that would never come? But madness, Rhea had learned, was sometimes the only refuge from a reality too cruel to bear. Now, as she felt the familiar stirring within her womb once more, Rhea knew that she carried what might be her final hope. The child growing inside her pulsed with a power unlike any she had felt before, a strength that seemed to challenge the very foundations of the cosmos. Sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, she could swear she felt tiny fists beating against her ribs, as if the unborn god was already preparing for battle. Not this one, she whispered to herself as she stood before the great window that overlooked the realm of the Titans. By all the powers that shaped the world, not this one. Her hands pressed protectively against her swollen belly, feeling the divine life that thrummed beneath her touch like captured lightning. This child would not share the fate of its siblings. This child would live, would grow, would perhaps one day fulfill the prophecy that haunted Kronos's dreams. But how could she save this precious life when she had failed so utterly to protect the others? Kronos watched her constantly now, his eyes burning with the paranoid intensity of a tyrant who trusted no one, not even his own wife. His spies were everywhere, nymphs who reported her every movement, minor gods who whispered her every word back to their master. The palace had become a prison, and she its most carefully guarded captive. As the time of birth approached, Rhea felt desperation clawing at her mind like a living thing. She had considered fleeing to the far corners of the earth, but Kronos's power extended everywhere. She had thought of appealing to the other titans, but they were too terrified of their brother's wrath to risk helping her. She had even contemplated ending her own existence, taking the child with her into oblivion rather than watching it suffer the same fate as its siblings. But her maternal instincts rebelled against such thoughts. It was in her darkest hour, when hope seemed nothing more than a cruel illusion, that salvation came from an unexpected source. Gaia, the ancient Earth Mother who had once counseled Kronos in his rebellion against Uranus, appeared to Rhea in a vision that shook the very foundations of reality. The primordial goddess materialized not as the nurturing mother figure of legend, but as a force of nature incarnate. Terrible and beautiful, ancient beyond measure, her eyes holding the wisdom of eons. "Daughter!" Gaia's voice rumbled through Rhea's consciousness like distant thunder, carrying with it the weight of mountains and the depth of oceans. "I have watched your suffering, and my heart breaks for the children who have been lost. But know this, the child you carry is special beyond your understanding. He is the one foretold in prophecy, the one who will break the cycle of tyranny that has plagued our kind since time began." Rhea fell to her knees before the vision, tears streaming down her face like rivers of liquid starlight. "Great Mother," she sobbed, "tell me how to save him. I cannot bear to lose another child to my husband's madness. I would give anything, sacrifice everything, if only this one might live." Gaia's expression softened with something approaching tenderness, though her power remained as overwhelming as ever. "There is a way, child, but it will require courage beyond anything you have ever shown, and cunning to match your husband's own. Are you prepared to deceive the Lord of Time himself? Are you willing to risk everything for the chance to save not just your son, but all of creation?" Without hesitation, Rhea nodded, her resolve hardening like steel forged in divine fire. "Tell me what I must do." The plan that Gaia revealed was audacious in its simplicity and terrifying in its implications. When the time came for the birth, Rhea would travel to the island of Crete, to a sacred cave hidden deep within Mount Ida. There, protected by ancient magic and shielded from Kronos' sight, she would bring forth her son. But the deception would not end there. She would need to return to her husband with a substitute, something that would fool even his divine senses long enough for the child to grow strong. As the vision faded and Gaia's presence withdrew from the mortal realm, Rhea felt a transformation taking place within her soul. The broken, grieving mother was still there, would always be there, but now she was joined by something else, a fierce protector, a warrior goddess who would stop at nothing to ensure her child's survival. The game of deception was about to begin, and the stakes could not be higher. The very fate of the cosmos hung in the balance, resting in the hands of a mother's love and a grandmother's wisdom. Soon, the child who would one day shake the heavens themselves would draw his first breath, and with it, the first chapter of Kronos' downfall would begin. Part 5. The Great Deception. The Stone Wrapped in Swaddling. The night of Zeus's birth arrived with an ominous stillness that seemed to hold the very cosmos in suspense. No wind stirred the leaves of the sacred olive trees, no waves lapped against the shores of distant islands, and even the stars themselves appeared to dim their light, as if the universe itself was holding its breath in anticipation of what was to come. Rhea, her divine form racked with the pains of labor, had managed to slip away from the palace under cover of darkness, following the ancient paths that Gaia had revealed to her in whispered visions. The journey to Crete had been treacherous, requiring all of her divine cunning to evade the network of spies and sentries that Kronos had placed throughout his realm. She had disguised herself as a minor nymph, cloaking her true power beneath layers of illusion so complex that even her husband's paranoid surveillance could not penetrate them. Every step had been agony, every breath a struggle, but the fierce determination burning in her heart had driven her forward through the pain. Mount Ida rose before her like a sleeping giant, its peaks shrouded in mists that seemed to whisper secrets older than memory itself. The sacred cave that Gaia had spoken of lay hidden deep within the mountain's heart, protected by enchantments woven into the very fabric of reality. As Rhea approached the entrance, she felt the ancient magic recognizing her, welcoming her, embracing her with the warmth of a mother's love. Inside the cave, surrounded by walls that gleamed with veins of precious metals and crystals that pulsed with their own inner light, Rhea finally allowed herself to collapse. The pain of childbirth, magnified by her divine nature, tore through her like lightning splitting the sky. But even as she cried out in agony, she felt a presence surrounding her. Not just Gaia, but the spirits of all the mothers who had ever fought to protect their children, lending her their strength and their courage. When Zeus finally emerged into the world, the very earth trembled with the force of his arrival. He was magnificent even as a newborn, his tiny form crackling with barely contained power, his eyes already blazing with the intelligence and determination that would one day make him king of the gods. Lightning flickered around his small fists, and when he cried, thunder rolled across the heavens, announcing to all creation that a new force had entered the world. But there was no time for wonder or celebration. Even as Rhea held her son for the first precious moments of his life, she could feel Kronos' awareness beginning to stir. Her husband's paranoia had grown so intense that he could sense disturbances in the cosmic order, and the birth of such a powerful being would not go unnoticed for long. She had perhaps hours, maybe less, before he would come searching for her with all the fury of a tyrant who suspected betrayal. With tears streaming down her face, Rhea kissed her newborn son's forehead and whispered words of love and protection that would echo through eternity. "My precious child," she murmured, "I cannot stay with you, but know that every breath I take, every beat of my heart, is dedicated to keeping you safe. Grow strong, my little thunder bearer. Grow strong and remember that you are loved beyond measure." The nymphs that Gaia had promised were already there, emerging from the shadows of the cave like guardian angels sent from the earth itself. Adrasteia and Ida, daughters of the mountain king Melicius, approached with reverent awe, their eyes wide with wonder at the sight of the divine child. They understood the magnitude of their task, to raise and protect the future king of the gods while keeping his very existence secret from the most powerful being in the universe. "We will guard him with our lives," Adrasteia promised, her voice carrying the solemnity of a sacred oath. "No harm shall come to him while he remains in our care." Rhea nodded, though every fiber of her being screamed in protest at the thought of leaving her child. But the deception was only half complete. and the most dangerous part still lay ahead. She had to return to Kronos with a substitute convincing enough to fool a god whose paranoia had sharpened his senses to supernatural levels. Following Gaia's instructions, Rhea made her way to a particular outcropping of rock near the cave's entrance. There, she found exactly what the Earth Mother had promised, a stone of unusual size and weight, its surface smooth and rounded by eons of wind and rain. But this was no ordinary rock. It had been shaped by divine will and imbued with subtle enchantments that would make it appear, to Kronos' senses, as a newborn god. With hands that trembled with both exhaustion and desperate hope, Rhea wrapped the stone in swaddling clothes, the same soft linens she had prepared for her son's birth. The magic, woven into the fabric by Gaia's power, made the deception complete. The stone now radiated the warmth of living flesh, pulsed with what seemed like a heartbeat, and even carried the scent of a newborn child. The journey back to the palace was a nightmare of barely controlled terror. Every shadow seemed to hide one of Kronos' spies. Every sound made her heart race with the fear of discovery. But the enchantments held, and when she finally arrived at the great gates of her home, the guards saw only what they expected to see, their queen returning from a difficult birth, carrying her newest child in her arms. Kronos was waiting for her in the throne room, his massive form radiating impatience and suspicion. His eyes, once warm with love for his wife, now burned with the cold fire of paranoia. "You took longer than expected," he said, his voice carrying undertones of threat that made the very air tremble. "I was beginning to wonder if you were planning something unwise." Rhea forced herself to meet his gaze, drawing upon reserves of courage she hadn't known she possessed. "The birth was difficult, my lord," she replied, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her heart. "But as you can see, we have been blessed with another child." She held out the bundle, and for a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, Kronos studied it with eyes that could pierce through any deception. The stone, wrapped in its enchanted swaddling, lay perfectly still, its magical disguise holding firm under the scrutiny of the Lord of Time himself. Rhea held her breath, knowing that if the deception failed now, not only would she face her husband's wrath, but her son would be doomed to the same fate as his siblings. Finally, Kronos reached out and took the bundle from her arms. The moment his fingers touched the wrapped stone, Rhea's heart nearly stopped, but the magic held. To his senses, he was holding a newborn god, another potential threat to his reign that needed to be eliminated before it could grow strong enough to challenge him. Without ceremony, without even a moment's hesitation, Kronos opened his massive jaws and swallowed the stone whole, believing he had just devoured his sixth child. The sound of his swallowing echoed through the throne room like the closing of a tomb, and Rhea had to bite her tongue to keep from crying out in a mixture of relief and revulsion. "It is done," Kronos said with grim satisfaction, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. Another threat eliminated before it could take root. Rhea nodded, not trusting herself to speak, her mind already racing ahead to the future. Somewhere on the island of Crete, her son was safe, growing stronger with each passing moment. The deception had worked, but she knew this was only the beginning. The real challenge would be keeping Zeus hidden until he was powerful enough to face his father and fulfill the destiny that the fates had woven for him. As she bowed before her husband and withdrew from the throne room, Rhea allowed herself one small smile of triumph. The tyrant had been fooled, and hope still lived in the world. Part 6. Hidden in Crete, Zeus's secret childhood. In the depths of the Dictaean cave, where shadows danced with ancient magic, and the very walls seemed to pulse with primordial power, the infant Zeus began his extraordinary childhood hidden from the eyes of his tyrannical father. The cave itself was a marvel of divine architecture, carved not by mortal hands but by the earth's own will, its chambers extending deep into the heart of Mount Ida like the chambers of a vast, beating heart. Crystalline formations jutted from the ceiling like frozen lightning, and underground springs bubbled with water so pure it seemed to sing with its own celestial music. Adrasteia and Ida, the mountain nymphs entrusted with Zeus's care, had transformed the cave into a nursery fit for a future king of the gods. They had woven cradles from golden branches that never withered, crafted toys from starlight and moonbeams, and filled the air with lullabies that carried the wisdom of ages. But their most important task was ensuring that no sound of the divine child's presence ever escaped the cave's protective embrace. This proved to be a challenge of unprecedented magnitude, for Zeus was no ordinary infant. Even in his earliest days, his cries could shake the very foundations of the mountain, and his laughter had the power to summon lightning from clear skies. When he was pleased, flowers bloomed spontaneously from the cave floor, and when he was angry, the temperature would rise until the very air shimmered with heat. The nymphs quickly realized that conventional methods of childcare would be utterly inadequate for such a being. It was Adrasteia who conceived the solution that would become legend. She gathered the curate, the divine warriors who served as guardians of sacred places, and explained to them the magnitude of their task. These bronze-armored beings born from the earth itself understood immediately what was required of them. Whenever Zeus cried or made any sound that might carry beyond the cave's walls, the curetes would begin their wild, ecstatic dance, clashing their shields and spears together in a rhythm so thunderous that it drowned out even the mightiest roar of the infant god. The sight was both magnificent and terrifying to behold. The curate moved with inhuman grace and power, their bronze armor gleaming in the cave's mystical light as they spun and leaped in patterns that seemed to mirror the very movements of the stars. Their war cries echoed through the chambers like the voices of 100 storms, and their weapons rang against each other with such force that sparks flew like falling stars. To any observer, it would have seemed like a celebration of war itself. But in truth, it was the most tender lullaby ever performed, a symphony of protection woven from the clash of bronze and the thunder of divine feet. As Zeus grew from infant to child, his power manifested in ways that both delighted and terrified his guardians. He could summon rain with a gesture, call down lightning to play in his tiny hands like harmless serpents of light, and speak with the voices of thunder even before he had learned to form proper words. The cave itself seemed to respond to his presence, its walls glowing brighter when he was happy, its springs flowing more sweetly when he was content. But it was not just his divine powers that marked Zeus as extraordinary. It was his intelligence, his curiosity, and his innate understanding of justice that set him apart even among the gods. While other divine children might have been content to play with toys of gold and silver, Zeus was fascinated by the stories that Adrasteia and Ida told him of the world beyond the cave. He listened with rapt attention to tales of his father's tyranny, his siblings' fate, and the prophecy that hung over the cosmos like a sword waiting to fall. "Tell me again about my brothers and sisters," he would say, his young voice carrying an authority that seemed impossible in one so small. "Tell me about Hestia's kindness, Demeter's love of growing things, Hera's fierce pride, Hades' wisdom, and Poseidon's strength. I want to remember them all." The nymphs would weave these stories with careful skill, painting pictures of the siblings he had never met, but whom he already loved with a fierce devotion. They told him of Hestia, goddess of the hearth, whose gentle nature had brought warmth and comfort to all who knew her. They spoke of Demeter, who could make the earth bloom with abundance, and whose laughter had once made the very seasons dance with joy. They described Hera's regal bearing and protective instincts, Hades' quiet strength and deep wisdom, and Poseidon's wild, untamable spirit that matched the oceans he would one day rule. With each story, Zeus's determination grew stronger. He began to understand that his hidden childhood was not just about survival, but about preparation. He was being shaped not just by the love of his guardians, but by the weight of destiny itself. The knowledge that his siblings lived on, trapped within their father's belly but not destroyed, filled him with a purpose that burned brighter than any flame. The Curetes, recognizing the growing power and wisdom in their young charge, began to train him in the arts of war and leadership. They taught him to wield weapons forged from celestial bronze, to move with the fluid grace of a born warrior, and to command with the authority of one destined to rule. But more importantly, they taught him about justice, about the difference between power used to protect and power used to oppress. A true king, the eldest of the Curetes told him during one of their training sessions, does not rule through fear, but through the love and respect of those he protects. Your father has forgotten this truth, and that is why his reign must end. Zeus absorbed these lessons with the intensity of one who knew that the fate of the cosmos might one day rest in his hands. He practiced his combat skills until he could move faster than lightning itself, studied the arts of strategy until he could see patterns and possibilities that escaped even divine minds, and honed his natural charisma until his very presence could inspire loyalty and courage in others. But perhaps the most important aspect of Zeus's hidden childhood was the love that surrounded him. Despite the constant danger, despite the need for secrecy and the weight of prophecy, the cave was filled with warmth and affection. Adrasteia and Ida loved him as if he were their own son. The Curetes served him with devotion that went beyond mere duty, and even the mountain itself seemed to embrace him as its chosen child. This love would prove to be Zeus's greatest strength in the trials to come. Unlike his father, who had been shaped by paranoia and fear, Zeus was being molded by compassion and hope. He was learning not just how to fight, but what was worth fighting for. He was discovering not just how to command, but how to inspire. And most importantly, he was understanding that true power came not from the ability to destroy, but from the wisdom to know when destruction was necessary and when mercy was the greater strength. As the years passed and Zeus grew from child to youth, the time of reckoning drew ever closer. Soon he would have to leave the safety of his hidden sanctuary and face the father who had tried to devour him. But when that day came, he would not go forth as a frightened child seeking revenge. He would emerge as a true king, armed not just with divine power, but with the wisdom, courage, and love that would make him worthy of the throne he was destined to claim. Part 7. The Nymphs and the Goat. Zeus's divine upbringing. As Zeus entered the bloom of his divine youth, his needs grew beyond what even the most devoted nymphs could provide through care alone. The young god's body, though still developing, already showed signs of the immense power that coursed through his immortal veins. His appetite had become legendary even among the cave's inhabitants, not merely for food, but for the divine sustenance that would fuel his growing strength. It was then that fate, or perhaps Gaia's continued providence, brought forth the most unlikely of nursemaids. Amalthea was no ordinary goat, though to mortal eyes she might have appeared as such. She was a creature of pure magic, born from the union of earth and sky in the earliest days of creation. Her coat shimmered with an otherworldly luster that seemed to capture and reflect the very essence of starlight, and her eyes held depths of wisdom that spoke of ancient secrets and timeless knowledge. When she first appeared at the mouth of the Dictaean cave, the curates immediately recognized her divine nature and welcomed her as another gift from the Earth Mother herself. The bond that formed between Zeus and Amalthea transcended the simple relationship between child and caretaker. From the moment the young god first tasted her milk, he felt a surge of power unlike anything he had experienced before. This was not merely nourishment for his body, but sustenance for his very soul. Amalthea's milk carried within it the essence of the earth itself, the strength of mountains, the persistence of rivers, the endurance of ancient forests, and the wild freedom of untamed lands. "Drink deeply, young lord," Amalthea would say in her voice that sounded like wind through sacred groves, "for you will need all the strength that the earth can give you for the trials that lie ahead." Under Amalthea's care, Zeus's development accelerated at an astounding pace. His muscles grew dense with divine power, his reflexes became lightning quick, and his mind sharpened to a clarity that could perceive the intricate workings of fate itself. But more than physical strength, he gained something far more precious, an unbreakable connection to the natural world that would serve him throughout his reign. The other inhabitants of the cave watched in wonder as Zeus learned to communicate not just with Amalthea, but with all the creatures that dwelt within Mount Ida's embrace. Eagles would perch upon his shoulders, sharing with him the secrets they had observed from their lofty flights. Wolves would emerge from the deepest forests to offer their loyalty, recognizing in him the alpha of all alphas. Even the ancient trees would whisper their wisdom to him through rustling leaves, teaching him patience and the long view of time that comes only with true maturity. Melissa, the bee nymph who had been appointed as another of Zeus's guardians, brought her own unique gifts to his upbringing. She arrived at the cave accompanied by swarms of golden bees whose honey possessed properties that defied mortal understanding. This was not the simple sweetness that mortals knew, but ambrosia in its purest form, the food of the gods that granted immortality and enhanced divine power beyond measure. "The bees have chosen you," Melissa explained, as she watched Zeus consume the sacred honey with obvious relish. "They recognize in you the future king of all creation, and they offer their gift freely. But remember, young lord, that with each drop of ambrosia you consume, you take on greater responsibility. Power without wisdom is the path to tyranny, and wisdom without compassion leads only to cold cruelty." These lessons were not lost on Zeus, who absorbed not just the physical benefits of his divine diet, but the moral teachings that came with it. He learned that every gift came with obligations, that every blessing carried the weight of responsibility. Unlike his father, who had taken his power as a right to be exercised without restraint, Zeus was being taught that true strength lay in knowing when not to use one's power. The education provided by his unusual family extended far beyond mere physical development. Adrasteia, whose name meant "she from whom none can escape," taught him about justice and the inescapable nature of divine law. She would tell him stories of mortals and immortals alike who had tried to escape the consequences of their actions, only to find that justice, though sometimes delayed, was never denied. "Your father believes that his power places him above all law," she would say, as they sat by the cave's sacred spring. "But he will learn, as all tyrants do, that there are forces in the universe greater than any individual will. You, my child, must be the instrument of that justice, but you must also be its embodiment. When you must rule not as a tyrant who imposes his will, but as a king who serves the greater good. Ida, whose connection to the mountain ran deeper than roots, taught Zeus about the patience of stone and the persistence of water. She showed him how the mightiest peaks could be worn down by gentle rain over eons, how the softest touch, applied consistently over time, could reshape the very foundations of the world. "Strength is not always about the thunderbolt, young Zeus," she would counsel him during their walks through the cave's deeper chambers. "Sometimes it is about the steady pressure that never relents, the quiet determination that outlasts all opposition. Your father rules through fear and sudden violence, but you must learn to rule through constancy and unwavering purpose." As Zeus grew stronger and wiser under this diverse tutelage, he began to exhibit powers that amazed even his divine guardians. He could call down lightning not just as a weapon, but as a tool of creation, using its energy to forge new pathways through solid rock or to bring life to barren soil. His voice, when raised in command, could compel obedience not through fear, but through the sheer force of his natural authority. But, perhaps most remarkably, he began to demonstrate an ability that would prove crucial in the battles to come, the power to inspire absolute loyalty in others. The Curettes, who had initially served him out of duty to Gaia, now followed him out of genuine love and respect. The nymphs, who had cared for him as guardians, now looked to him as their chosen leader. Even the wild creatures of the mountain recognized him as their rightful king. This gift for leadership was not born of divine compulsion or magical influence, but from Zeus's genuine care for those under his protection. He remembered every kindness shown to him, every sacrifice made for his safety, every lesson taught with patience and love. In return, he gave his own loyalty freely and completely, creating bonds that would endure through the greatest trials. As the years passed and Zeus approached the fullness of his divine maturity, the time for hiding drew to a close. His power had grown to the point where even the cave's ancient enchantments struggled to contain it. Lightning flickered constantly around his form now, and his very presence caused the mountain itself to tremble with barely contained energy. Amalthea, sensing that their time together was ending, made one final gift to her beloved charge. With a gesture of supreme sacrifice, she offered one of her horns to Zeus, imbuing it with all the power of abundance and plenty that she possessed. "This shall be your cornucopia," she said, her voice heavy with both pride and sorrow. "From it shall flow all the good things of the earth, food for the hungry, drink for the thirsty, hope for the despairing. Remember, my child, that a king's greatest power lies not in what he can take, but in what he can give." Zeus accepted the horn with tears in his eyes, understanding that this gift represented not just magical power, but the culmination of all the love and wisdom that had shaped his hidden childhood. Soon, he would have to leave this sanctuary and face the father who had tried to destroy him. But he would not go forth alone. He would carry with him the strength of Amalthea, the wisdom of the nymphs, the loyalty of the curette, and the love of all who had helped shape him into the god he was destined to become. The boy who had been hidden in fear was ready to emerge as the king who would reshape the cosmos itself. Part 8. The Growing Storm. Zeus discovers his true identity. The morning that would change the course of divine history began like any other in the sacred cave, with the gentle sound of underground springs and the soft murmur of nymphs going about their daily tasks. But Zeus, now grown into the full flower of his divine youth, felt a restlessness that had been building within him for months. His body thrummed with power that seemed to grow stronger each day, and his mind burned with questions that his guardians had begun to answer with increasing reluctance. Standing at the cave's entrance, Zeus gazed out at the world beyond Mount Ida, with eyes that blazed like captured starlight. The morning sun painted the landscape in shades of gold and amber, but even this beauty could not quiet the storm that raged within his immortal heart. He had grown tired of shadows and secrecy, weary of a life spent hiding from an enemy he had never seen. The stories of his siblings trapped and suffering haunted his dreams and filled his waking hours with a burning need for action. "How long must I remain here?" he asked Adrastea, who had approached with her usual silent grace. "How long must I live like a prisoner while my family suffers and the world groans under my father's tyranny?" The nymph's expression was troubled, for she had seen this moment approaching like a storm on the horizon. Zeus's power had grown beyond their ability to contain, and his questions had become more pointed, more demanding. She knew that the time for half-truths and gentle evasions had passed, but the full truth carried dangers that made her immortal heart tremble with fear. "My lord," she began carefully, "there are things you must understand before you can act. Your father's power is beyond anything you can imagine. He has ruled for eons and his strength has only grown with time. To face him unprepared would be to throw away not just your own life, but the hope of all who suffer under his reign." Zeus turned to face her, and the intensity in his gaze made even the ancient nymph step back. "Then tell me what I need to know," he said, his voice carrying the authority of one born to command. "Tell me everything. I am tired of being treated like a child who cannot handle the truth." It was then that Ida emerged from the cave's depths, her face grave with the weight of momentous decision. In her hands, she carried something that Zeus had never seen before, a crystal sphere that pulsed with inner light, its surface swirling with images that seemed to move and shift like living memories. "Very well," Ida said, her voice heavy with resignation. "You are right, young lord. The time for secrets has passed. But know that once you see what this sphere contains, there will be no going back. You will understand not just who you are, but what you must become." Zeus reached for the sphere without hesitation, and the moment his fingers touched its surface, the world exploded into visions that seared themselves into his consciousness with the force of divine revelation. He saw his birth in this very cave, witnessed his mother's desperate flight, and the terrible deception that had saved his life. He watched in horror as Kronos devoured the stone, wrapped in swaddling clothes, believing he was consuming his own son. But the visions did not stop there. The sphere showed him scenes from before his birth, the systematic destruction of his siblings, each one torn from Rhea's arms and swallowed whole by their paranoid father. He saw Hestia's gentle light extinguished in an instant, Demeter's nurturing spirit crushed before it could bloom, Hera's proud defiance silenced by Kronos' merciless jaws. He witnessed Hades's stoic acceptance of his fate and Poseidon's wild struggle against the inevitable. The pain of these visions was beyond anything Zeus had ever experienced. It was not just the horror of what he saw, but the sudden, overwhelming understanding of what he had lost. These were not just names in stories told by loving guardians. These were his family, his blood, his responsibility. They lived still, trapped in the darkness of their father's belly, waiting for a salvation that only he could provide. "Why?" he whispered, his voice breaking with the weight of newfound knowledge. Why did he do this to his own children? Adrastea's voice was soft with ancient sorrow as she answered. "Because he was afraid, my lord. Your father overthrew his own father, Uranus, in an act of terrible violence. Ever since, he has lived in terror that one of his children would do the same to him. The prophecy spoke of a son who would cast him down, and in his paranoia, he chose to destroy all his children rather than face that fate. Zeus felt something fundamental shift within him as the full implications of this revelation settled into his mind. The restlessness that had plagued him for months suddenly crystallized into something far more powerful, a sense of destiny that burned like a forge fire in his chest. He was not just Zeus, the hidden prince of the gods. He was Zeus the liberator, the one prophesied to break the cycle of tyranny that had plagued the divine realm since time began. "The prophecy," he said, his voice growing stronger with each word. "Tell me about the prophecy." Ida nodded, as if she had been expecting this question. It was spoken by the fates themselves, woven into the very fabric of destiny. They foretold that Kronos would father a son who would prove mightier than himself, one who would cast him down, just as he had cast down Uranus. Your father has spent eons trying to prevent this prophecy from coming to pass, but the fates cannot be denied. You are that son, Zeus. You are the storm that will break upon his reign and wash it away forever. The weight of prophecy settled upon Zeus's shoulders like a mantle of starlight, heavy with responsibility, but also blazing with purpose. He understood now why he had been hidden, why he had been trained, why every moment of his secret childhood had been preparation for this ultimate confrontation. But understanding brought with it a terrible clarity about what lay ahead. "I must face him," Zeus said, and it was not a question, but a statement of absolute certainty. "I must free my siblings and end his reign of terror. But I cannot do it alone." The curate, who had been listening from the shadows, stepped forward as one. Their bronze armor gleamed in the cave's mystical light, and their eyes burned with the same fierce determination that now blazed in their young lord's heart. "You will not be alone," their leader declared, his voice ringing with the authority of an oath sworn before the gods themselves. "We have served you since your birth, and we will follow you into the very depths of Tartarus if necessary. Your cause is just, your destiny is clear, and your victory is foretold by fate itself." Amalthea, who had been silent throughout these revelations, now approached with tears glistening in her ancient eyes. "My child," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "I have given you all the strength that the earth can provide. You have drunk deep of wisdom and power, and you have been shaped by love rather than fear. When you face your father, remember that you fight not for revenge, but for justice. You fight not to become a new tyrant, but to become a true king." Zeus nodded, feeling the truth of her words resonate in his very soul. The anger that burned within him was not the cold fury of personal vendetta, but the righteous fire of one who had seen injustice and could not rest until it was corrected. He would face Kronos not as a son seeking to overthrow his father, but as a champion of all who suffered under tyranny's heel. As the sun reached its zenith above Mount Ida, Zeus made his decision. The time for hiding was over. The storm that had been gathering in the depths of the sacred cave was ready to break upon the world, and when it did, the very foundations of the cosmos would tremble. Kronos had sown the wind with his cruelty and paranoia, and now he would reap the whirlwind that was his son's righteous fury. The boy who had been hidden in darkness was ready to step into the light and claim his destiny as the king of the gods. Part 9, Metis and the Plan. The emetic Tomitian. The decision to confront Kronos had been made, but Zeus quickly realized that raw power alone would not be sufficient to overcome a tyrant who had ruled unchallenged for eons. As he stood at the threshold between his hidden childhood and his destined confrontation, the young god understood that he would need something his father had never possessed: wisdom to match his strength. It was this recognition that led him to seek out the one being whose counsel could turn the tide of divine war. Metis, the titaness of wisdom and cunning, dwelt in the spaces between thoughts, in the realm where pure intellect took form and strategy became art. She was Kronos' own cousin, born of the union between Oceanus and Tethys, but her loyalty had never belonged to the tyrant who ruled through fear. Instead, she had watched the cosmos with the detached clarity of one who saw all possibilities and understood the intricate web of cause and effect that governed even the gods. Finding Metis required Zeus to venture beyond the physical realm into the ethereal spaces where consciousness itself took shape. Guided by Adrastea's whispered instructions and protected by enchantments woven by Ida, Zeus projected his awareness across the boundaries of reality until he stood in a place that existed everywhere and nowhere at once. The realm of pure thought was unlike anything Zeus had ever experienced. Here, ideas took physical form, floating through an endless expanse like luminous butterflies made of crystallized wisdom. Concepts that mortals could barely grasp became tangible objects that could be examined, combined, and reshaped according to will and understanding. In the center of this impossible space sat Metis herself, a figure of such perfect beauty and terrible intelligence that even Zeus, in all his divine glory, felt humbled by her presence. Metis appeared as a woman of indeterminate age, her features shifting subtly as different aspects of wisdom manifested through her form. Sometimes she seemed young, with eyes bright with curiosity and discovery. Other times she appeared ancient, her gaze heavy with the weight of eons of accumulated knowledge. Her hair flowed like liquid starlight, and when she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that resonated with the fundamental frequencies of truth itself. "So," she said, without preamble, her eyes studying Zeus with an intensity that seemed to peer directly into his soul. "The hidden prince finally emerges from his cave. I have been watching your development with great interest, young Zeus. Your guardians have done well in shaping you, but the true test of your character lies ahead." Zeus felt no surprise that she knew of his presence before he had even announced himself. Metis was wisdom incarnate, and wisdom saw all things in their proper time and place. Instead, he bowed with the respect due to one whose power, though different from his own, was no less formidable. "Great Metis," he said, his voice carrying the formal cadences appropriate for addressing one of the elder titans. "I come seeking your counsel. I know what I must do, but I lack the knowledge of how to accomplish it. My father's power is vast, and his paranoia has made him nearly impossible to approach. How can I hope to free my siblings when I cannot even get close enough to challenge him?" Metis smiled, and in that expression Zeus saw depths of understanding that made him feel like a child again. But it was not a condescending smile. Rather, it was the look of a teacher who had found a student worthy of her greatest lessons. "Power without strategy is merely destruction," she said, rising from her seat and beginning to pace around Zeus in a circle that seemed to bend space itself. "Your father rules through brute force and terror, but these very strengths have become his greatest weaknesses. His paranoia has isolated him from potential allies, and his cruelty has turned even his own family against him. We must use these weaknesses against him." As she spoke, Metis gestured, and the space around them filled with shifting images that illustrated her words. Zeus saw visions of Kronos in his palace, surrounded by fearful servants and suspicious guards, trusting no one and confiding in none. He saw the other titans, many of whom had grown weary of their brother's increasingly erratic rule, but dared not speak against him openly. "The key," Metis continued, "lies not in confronting your father directly, but in turning his own nature against him. His greatest fear is that one of his children will overthrow him, but his greatest weakness is his inability to resist consuming anything he perceives as a threat. We must use this compulsion to our advantage." Zeus leaned forward, his mind racing as he began to see the outline of a plan forming in the swirling images around them. "You speak of making him consume something, but what could possibly harm one as powerful as Kronos?" Metis's smile grew wider, and for a moment her form shifted to reveal the cunning aspect of wisdom, the part that understood that sometimes the greatest truths were hidden in the simplest solutions. "Not harm him," she corrected, "but rather force him to undo what he has already done. Your siblings are not dead, young Zeus. They live still within your father's belly, preserved by their own divine nature but trapped in darkness. What we need is not a weapon to destroy Kronos, but a key to unlock the prison he has made of his own body." The revelation struck Zeus like a thunderbolt of understanding. His siblings were alive, waiting for rescue, and the means of their salvation lay not in violence, but in cunning. But even as hope flared in his heart, practical concerns crowded his mind. "How can such a thing be accomplished?" he asked. "What power could force the Lord of Time himself to release what he has consumed?" Metis moved to a section of her realm where the concepts of healing and restoration took physical form as glowing herbs and crystalline potions. With movements that seemed to dance between dimensions, she began combining elements that existed only in the realm of pure possibility. "An emetic potion," she explained as she worked, "but not one made from earthly herbs or mortal alchemy. This must be a draught of such power that even a titan cannot resist its effects. We will combine the essence of mustard seed, blessed by Gaia herself, for its power to purge corruption, with the tears of the sea nymphs who weep for all the injustices of the world. To this we will add the concentrated fury of the storm winds and the inexorable pull of the earth's own gravity." As she spoke, the potion took shape before Zeus's eyes, a swirling mixture that seemed to contain the very forces of nature in liquid form. It pulsed with power that made the air itself tremble, and Zeus could feel its potency even from a distance. "But how will I convince my father to drink such a thing?" Zeus asked, though even as the words left his lips, he began to understand the deeper layers of Metis's plan. "You will not appear before him as Zeus, the son he tried to destroy," Metis replied, her eyes gleaming with the satisfaction of a perfect strategy. "You will come to him disguised as a simple cupbearer, a minor god seeking employment in his household. Kronos' paranoia makes him suspicious of equals and superiors, but he pays little attention to those he considers beneath his notice. In his arrogance, he will not see the threat that stands before him." The plan was audacious in its simplicity and terrifying in its implications. Zeus would have to walk directly into the heart of his father's power, carrying with him the means of Kronos' downfall, and somehow convince the most paranoid being in existence to consume a potion that would undo his greatest crimes. "The risk is enormous," Metis continued, her expression growing serious. "If you are discovered before the potion takes effect, Kronos will destroy you without hesitation. But if you succeed, you will not only free your siblings, but also strike a blow against tyranny that will echo through all of creation." Zeus took the potion from Metis's hands, feeling its weight, not just physical, but metaphysical, the weight of destiny itself contained in a simple vessel. The liquid within seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat, and he could sense the incredible forces that Metis had bound within its crystalline confines. "I understand the risks," he said, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what lay ahead. "But I also understand that this may be our only chance. My siblings have waited long enough for freedom, and the cosmos has suffered too long under my father's rule. Métis nodded approvingly, and for a moment her form stabilized into that of a proud teacher whose student had finally grasped the most important lesson of all. "Remember," she said as Zeus prepared to return to the physical realm, "wisdom is not just about knowing what to do, but knowing when to do it. Wait for the right moment, trust in the plan, and do not let emotion override strategy. Your father's downfall will come not from your strength, but from his own nature turned against him." As Zeus faded from the realm of pure thought, carrying with him the means of his family's salvation, Métis watched with eyes that saw all possible futures. The die was cast, the plan was in motion, and soon the cosmos would witness whether wisdom and justice could triumph over tyranny and fear. Part 10. The Confrontation. Zeus faces his father. The palace of Kronos rose from the earth like a monument to absolute power, its towers piercing the heavens themselves and its foundations extending deep into the primordial bedrock of creation. Built from stones that had witnessed the birth of the cosmos, the structure radiated an aura of ancient authority that made even the bravest souls tremble in its shadow. As Zeus approached the massive gates, disguised by Métis's cunning illusions, as a humble cupbearer named Ganymedes, he felt the weight of destiny pressing down upon him like the gravity of a collapsing star. The transformation that Métis had wrought upon him was masterful in its completeness. Gone was the blazing aura of divine power that normally surrounded Zeus like captured lightning. In its place was the modest presence of a minor deity, unremarkable enough to escape notice yet skilled enough to justify employment in the household of the king of the Titans. His golden hair had been dulled to brown, his commanding stature reduced to average height, and his eyes, those windows to a soul that burned with the fire of justice, now appeared as ordinary as morning dew. The guards at the palace gates barely glanced at him as he presented himself for employment. These were beings of immense power in their own right, titans and their offspring who could reshape mountains with a gesture, but they had grown complacent in their master's seemingly unshakable dominion. Who would dare approach the palace of Kronos with hostile intent? What force in all creation could threaten the Lord of Time himself? "Another cupbearer," one guard muttered to his companion, his voice carrying the boredom of one who had seen countless such petitioners over the eons. The master grows ever more paranoid about his drink. Last month he had 3 of them executed for imagined slights. Zeus felt his jaw clench at this casual mention of his father's cruelty, but he forced his expression to remain neutral. The potion that Métis had crafted rested in a hidden pocket of his robes, its container warded with spells that would prevent even Kronos from detecting its true nature. But all the magical concealment in the world would be useless if Zeus allowed his emotions to betray him before he could complete his mission. The interior of the palace was a testament to the wealth and power that Kronos had accumulated over his long reign. Corridors stretched for miles in every direction, their walls adorned with tapestries that depicted the Titan's victories over his enemies and the submission of lesser beings to his will. Statues of Kronos himself dominated every chamber, each one larger and more imposing than the last, as if the very architecture was designed to remind all who entered of their insignificance compared to the master of the house. Zeus was led through this maze of opulence by a nervous steward whose hands shook with barely controlled terror. The man, for he appeared to be one of the few mortals granted the dubious honor of serving in the palace, kept glancing over his shoulder as if expecting to be struck down at any moment for some imagined transgression. "The master is particular about his service," the steward whispered as they walked. "Speak only when spoken to, never look directly into his eyes unless commanded, and above all, never ever question his orders." The last cupbearer who hesitated when told to taste the wine for poison was fed to the 100-handed ones. Each word was like a dagger to Zeus's heart, confirming everything he had been told about his father's descent into paranoid tyranny. This was not the golden age that the Titans had promised when they overthrew Uranus. This was a reign of terror that had turned even the palace servants into trembling shadows of their former selves. The throne room, when they finally reached it, was a space so vast that its ceiling disappeared into darkness above. The walls were lined with the skulls of Kronos' enemies, their empty sockets seeming to watch the proceedings with the hollow gaze of the defeated. At the far end of this chamber of horrors sat the throne itself, carved from a single block of obsidian and inlaid with veins of precious metals that pulsed with their own inner light. And upon that throne sat Kronos. Zeus had to call upon every ounce of his self-control to keep from reacting to his first sight of the father who had tried to devour him. Kronos was enormous, even by the standards of the Titans, his form radiating power that made the very air shimmer with heat. His hair was the color of tarnished silver, and his eyes burned with the cold fire of one who had seen too much and trusted too little. When he moved, even the slightest gesture, reality itself seemed to bend around him in acknowledgement of his authority. But it was not Kronos' power that struck Zeus most forcefully. It was the unmistakable signs of the madness that had consumed him. The Titan King's eyes darted constantly from shadow to shadow, as if expecting assassins to emerge from every corner. His hands gripped the arms of his throne with such force that the obsidian had cracked under the pressure, and when he spoke, his voice carried undertones of barely controlled hysteria. "Another cupbearer," Kronos said, his voice echoing through the vast chamber like distant thunder. "Tell me, little godling, what makes you think you can serve me better than your predecessors? What assurance can you give me that you are not another assassin sent by my enemies to poison my cup?" Zeus bowed low, allowing the humble persona that Metis had crafted to guide his words. "Great Lord," he said, his voice carefully modulated to convey respect without confidence, "I seek only the honor of serving one whose power spans the cosmos. I have no ambitions beyond ensuring that your wine is perfectly prepared and your thirst is quenched." Kronos studied him with eyes that seemed to pierce through flesh and bone to examine the very essence of his soul. For a moment that stretched into eternity, Zeus feared that his disguise had been penetrated, that his father's paranoia had sharpened his perceptions beyond what even Metis' magic could fool. But then the Titan King laughed, a sound like grinding stone that held no warmth or humor. "Perfectly prepared wine," Kronos repeated mockingly. "Do you know how many have promised me that, little cupbearer? Do you know how many have failed to deliver on such simple words?" He gestured to the skulls that lined the walls, and Zeus realized with horror that many of them were far too small to have belonged to warriors or rivals. They were the remains of servants who had displeased their master in ways both great and small. "I will not fail you, my lord," Zeus replied, and in those words he spoke a truth deeper than Kronos could possibly understand. He would not fail, but not in the way his father expected. "We shall see," Kronos said, settling back into his throne with the satisfaction of a predator who had found new prey to torment. "You will begin your duties immediately. I am hosting a feast tonight to celebrate another year of my glorious reign, and I will require wine that befits such an occasion. Fail me, and your skull will join the collection. Serve me well, and you may live to see another dawn." As Zeus was led away to the palace kitchens to begin his charade, he felt the weight of the hidden potion against his chest like a second heartbeat. Tonight When Kronos raised his cup in celebration of his own power, he would unknowingly drink the instrument of his downfall. The tyrant's reign of terror was about to end, not with the clash of armies or the thunder of divine warfare, but with a single sip of wine that would undo the greatest crime in the history of the cosmos. The confrontation that would reshape the heavens themselves was about to begin, and Zeus carried within his heart not just the hope of his imprisoned siblings, but the dreams of all who yearned for freedom from tyranny's cruel embrace. Part 11. The Regurgitation, Freeing the Swallowed Siblings. The great feast hall of Kronos blazed with the light of 1,000 torches, their flames casting dancing shadows across walls adorned with the spoils of countless victories. The assembled guests represented the pinnacle of Titan society, beings of immense power, an ancient lineage who had gathered to celebrate another year of their king's unchallenged dominion. Yet beneath the veneer of celebration, Zeus could sense an undercurrent of fear that permeated the very air like a noxious perfume. The Titans laughed too loudly at their king's jests, applauded too enthusiastically at his pronouncements, and watched each other with the wary eyes of courtiers who knew that a single misstep could mean death. This was not a celebration born of joy or genuine loyalty, but a ritual of survival performed by beings who had learned that the price of displeasing Kronos was too terrible to contemplate. Zeus moved through this gathering of immortals like a ghost, his disguise holding firm even under the scrutiny of beings whose senses could perceive the movement of atoms and the flow of time itself. In his hands, he carried a golden chalice filled with wine that appeared to be the finest vintage from the vineyards of Mount Nisa, but which in truth contained the most potent emetic potion ever conceived. The liquid within seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat, and Zeus could feel its power pressing against the magical wards that concealed its true nature. "My loyal subjects," Kronos declared, raising his own cup high above his head, "tonight we celebrate not just another year of my reign, but the eternal stability that my rule has brought to the cosmos. Under my guidance, the universe has known peace and order. The chaos that marked the reign of my father has been banished forever, and no force in creation dares to challenge my authority." The assembled Titans raised their own cups in response, their voices joining in a chorus of agreement that rang hollow in the vast chamber. Zeus felt his jaw clench at the hypocrisy of it all. This was not peace, but oppression, not order, but the silence of the terrorized. But he forced himself to remain calm, to play his role as the humble cupbearer who existed only to serve his master's pleasure. As the feast progressed, Zeus watched for his opportunity with the patience of a hunter stalking the most dangerous of prey. Kronos drank deeply, and often his paranoia temporarily dulled by the wine and the intoxicating rush of being surrounded by those who feared him. But even in his cups, the Titan King remained alert to potential threats, his eyes constantly scanning the room for signs of treachery or rebellion. It was near midnight when Zeus finally saw his chance. Kronos had dismissed his previous cupbearer with a casual wave, the unfortunate being having committed the crime of allowing the king's cup to remain empty for more than a few seconds. As the trembling servant fled the hall, Zeus stepped forward with the poisoned chalice, his heart pounding so loudly that he feared it might betray him. "My lord," Zeus said, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was about to attempt, "allow me to refill your cup with wine worthy of your greatness." Kronos looked up at him with eyes that burned like dying stars, and for a moment Zeus felt the full weight of his father's attention pressing down upon him like a physical force. The Titan King's gaze seemed to pierce through every layer of disguise and deception, searching for any hint of the truth that lay hidden beneath. "You are new," Kronos observed, his voice carrying a note of suspicion that made Zeus's blood run cold. "I do not recognize you from among my usual servants. Tell me, cupbearer, what is your name and from whence do you come?" Zeus felt the moment balanced on a knife's edge, knowing that his next words would determine not just his own fate, but the destiny of all creation. Drawing upon the lessons that Metis had taught him about the power of truth, hidden within deception, he spoke with the confidence of one who had nothing to hide. "I am called Ganymedes, my lord," he replied, using the false name that had been woven into his disguise. "I come from the distant mountains, seeking only the honor of serving the greatest of all the Titans. Your reputation for wisdom and justice has spread even to the remotest corners of your realm." The flattery was calculated to appeal to Kronos' vanity, and Zeus saw with relief that it had the desired effect. The Titan King's expression softened slightly, his suspicion giving way to the satisfaction of one whose ego had been properly stroked. "Wisdom and justice," Kronos repeated with evident pleasure. "Yes, these are the pillars upon which my reign is built. Very well, Ganymedes, let us see if your service matches your words. Fill my cup and let us drink to the eternal stability of my rule." Zeus stepped forward and poured the poisoned wine into Kronos' goblet, watching as the liquid flowed like liquid starlight into the vessel. The potion's true nature remained hidden beneath layers of illusion so complex that even Zeus himself could barely detect its presence. To all appearances, it was simply the finest wine ever created, worthy of the king of the Titans. Kronos raised the cup to his lips, and in that moment time itself seemed to slow to a crawl. Zeus watched with held breath as his father prepared to drink the instrument of his own downfall, the key that would unlock the prison he had made of his own body. The assembled Titans continued their revelry, unaware that they were witnessing the end of an age and the beginning of a new chapter in the history of the cosmos. The wine touched Kronos' lips and he drank deeply, draining the entire cup in a single draught. For a moment, nothing happened, and Zeus felt a stab of terror that the potion had somehow failed, that Metis' careful calculations had been wrong. But then Kronos' expression began to change, confusion replacing satisfaction as the emetic began to take effect.
"What?" Kronos began, but his words were cut off as his body convulsed with the first wave of the potion's power. The cup fell from his nerveless fingers, shattering on the floor like a crystal bell, and the Titan King doubled over as forces beyond his control seized his immortal form.
The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Kronos' body, which had contained his children for so many years, began to rebel against its unnatural burden. The emetic potion, crafted from the very forces of nature itself, compelled his divine physiology to reverse the process that had kept his offspring trapped in darkness. With a sound like thunder splitting the heavens, Kronos began to regurgitate his swallowed children. First came the stone that Rhea had substituted for Zeus, emerging from the Titan's throat with such force that it shattered the marble floor where it landed. Then, in rapid succession, came the gods themselves: Poseidon, Hades, Hera, Demeter, and finally Hestia, each one emerging fully grown and blazing with divine power that had only grown stronger during their long imprisonment. The great feast hall erupted into chaos as the assembled Titans realized what was happening. Some fled in terror, others stood frozen in shock, and a few of the bolder ones reached for weapons, though none dared to act without their king's command. But Kronos himself was beyond giving orders, his body racked with convulsions as the last effects of the potion worked their way through his system. Zeus threw off his disguise like a discarded cloak, his true form blazing forth with the power of lightning and storm. The humble cupbearer vanished, replaced by the god of thunder in all his terrible glory. Lightning crackled around his form, and when he spoke, his voice carried the authority of one born to rule. "Brothers, sisters," he called out, his words cutting through the chaos like a blade. "I am Zeus, your youngest brother, and I have come to free you from our father's tyranny. The time of hiding is over, the time of justice has begun." The newly freed gods looked upon their liberator with expressions of wonder and gratitude that would have moved even the hardest heart. Poseidon, his beard dripping with the essence of all the world's oceans, stepped forward first, his eyes blazing with the fury of storms long suppressed. "Brother," he said, his voice carrying the power of crashing waves, "we have waited so long for this moment. Our father's crimes cry out for justice, and we stand ready to answer that call." Hades, lord of the underworld, though he did not yet know it, nodded grimly, his presence seeming to draw shadows from the very air. "The dead have whispered of this day," he said, his voice carrying the finality of the grave. "Justice delayed is not justice denied, and our time has come at last." As the six siblings stood united for the first time in their existence, Zeus felt a surge of emotion that threatened to overwhelm him. These were not just allies in the coming war. They were his family, his blood, the other half of his soul that had been missing for so long. Together they would face whatever trials lay ahead, and together they would reshape the cosmos itself. The age of Kronos was ending, and the age of the Olympians was about to begin. Part 12, The Great Alliance. Gods unite against the Titans. The palace of Kronos had become a battlefield in the span of mere moments, its once opulent halls now echoing with the clash of divine powers as the newly freed gods faced the assembled might of the Titan court. The air itself crackled with competing energies, lightning from Zeus, the crushing weight of ocean depths from Poseidon, the inexorable pull of the grave from Hades, and the nurturing yet terrible power of the earth from Demeter. The very foundations of reality seemed to strain under the pressure of so much concentrated divinity unleashed in a single space. Kronos, still reeling from the effects of the emetic potion, struggled to comprehend the magnitude of what had just occurred. His children, the threats he had tried so desperately to eliminate, stood before him in all their terrible glory, no longer helpless infants but gods in the full flower of their power. The prophecy that had haunted his dreams for eons was finally coming to pass, and he could see his own doom reflected in their blazing eyes.
"Impossible!" he gasped, his voice hoarse from the violence of his regurgitation. "You were destroyed. I consumed you myself. This cannot be happening." Zeus stepped forward, his form wreathed in lightning that cast stark shadows across the ruined feast hall. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of thunder itself, each word striking like a hammer blow against the crumbling edifice of his father's reign. "Nothing is impossible when justice demands satisfaction," Zeus declared, his eyes never leaving Kronos' face. "You tried to murder your own children out of fear and paranoia, but the fates cannot be cheated forever. We have returned to claim what is rightfully ours and to end your reign of terror once and for all."
The Titans who had remained in the hall began to rally around their king, their own divine powers manifesting as they prepared for battle. Oceanus, the eldest of the Titans, stepped forward with the weight of all the world's waters behind him. Hyperion blazed with the light of 1,000 suns, while Chaos radiated the cold intelligence of the northern axis around which the heavens turned. These were beings of immense power and ancient authority, and they would not yield their positions without a fight. But even as the battle lines were drawn, Zeus knew that raw power alone would not be sufficient to overcome enemies who had ruled the cosmos for eons. The Titans had experience, established strongholds, and the loyalty of countless lesser beings who served them out of fear or habit. If the Olympians were to have any hope of victory, they would need allies of their own, beings whose hatred of Kronos' tyranny ran as deep as their own. It was Hestia who first voiced what they all understood. "We cannot face the entire Titan host alone," she said, her gentle voice carrying wisdom that belied her apparent youth. "We must seek out others who have suffered under our father's rule, those who yearn for freedom but have lacked the power to claim it." Zeus nodded, his strategic mind already racing through the possibilities. "The Cyclopes," he said, his voice growing stronger with conviction. "Father imprisoned them in Tartarus when he feared their skill at forging weapons. If we can free them, they will surely join our cause." Poseidon's eyes lit up with understanding. "And the 100-handed ones," he added, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. "The Hecatonchires were cast into the same prison for the crime of being too powerful for our father's comfort. Their strength could tip the balance in our favor. But even as they spoke of potential allies, the immediate threat demanded their attention. The Titans had finished their preparations for battle, and Kronos himself was beginning to recover from the shock of his children's return. The Titan King rose from his throne with the slow, terrible majesty of a mountain coming to life, his form seeming to expand until he filled the entire hall with his presence.
"You dare to speak of justice?" Kronos roared, his voice shaking the very pillars of the palace. "I am justice. I am order. I am the force that keeps the cosmos from descending into chaos. You are nothing but ungrateful children who would destroy everything I have built."
The battle that erupted then was unlike anything the cosmos had ever witnessed. Divine powers clashed with forces that could reshape continents, and the very fabric of reality groaned under the strain. Zeus hurled thunderbolts that could split mountains, while Kronos wielded time itself as a weapon, slowing his enemies' movements and accelerating his own attacks. Poseidon summoned tsunamis that crashed against Oceanus' defenses, while Hades opened rifts to the underworld that threatened to swallow their enemies whole. But the Olympians were outnumbered and fighting on their enemies' chosen ground. For every Titan they faced, two more seemed to take their place, and the palace's defenses had been designed to channel and amplify the power of its defenders. It quickly became clear that this initial confrontation was not meant to be the decisive battle, but rather the opening move in a war that would span the heavens themselves. "We must retreat," Hades called out over the din of battle, his tactical mind recognizing the futility of their current position. "This is not the time or place for our final victory." Zeus, though every fiber of his being rebelled against the idea of fleeing from his father, knew that his brother spoke wisdom. They had achieved their primary objective, the liberation of his siblings and the announcement of their rebellion. Now they needed time to gather their strength and seek out the allies who would make victory possible. With a gesture that summoned all his power, Zeus created a barrier of lightning that held back their enemies long enough for the Olympians to make their escape. They burst through the palace walls like shooting stars, their combined radiance lighting up the night sky as they fled toward the distant peaks of Mount Olympus. Behind them, Kronos' roar of fury shook the very foundations of the earth. "This is not over," he bellowed, his voice carrying across the cosmos like a curse. "I will hunt you to the ends of creation. I will tear down the very heavens before I allow you to usurp my throne." But the Olympians were already gone, vanishing into the night like a dream of freedom that could not be contained. As they flew through the star-filled darkness, Zeus felt a mixture of exhilaration and grim determination filling his heart. The first blow had been struck, the die had been cast, and there could be no turning back now. The war that would determine the fate of the cosmos had begun, and Zeus knew that everything they had fought for, justice, freedom, the right to exist without fear, hung in the balance. But they were no longer alone in their struggle. Soon, they would descend into the depths of Tartarus to free the Cyclopes and the Hundred-Handed Ones, and with their aid, they would build an alliance that could challenge even the might of the Titans. The age of tyranny was ending, and the age of the Olympians was about to begin. But first, they would have to survive the war that would shake the very pillars of heaven and earth. As Mount Olympus rose before them in the distance, its peak shrouded in clouds that seemed to welcome their approach, Zeus allowed himself a moment of hope. They had taken the first step on a journey that would either lead to glorious victory or utter destruction. But whatever the outcome, they would face it together, as family, as gods, and as the champions of all who yearned to be free. The greatest war in the history of creation was about to begin. Part 13, the Titanomachy, begins, War in the Heavens. The cosmos itself seemed to hold its breath as the greatest war in the history of creation erupted across the heavens. What had begun as a family dispute in the halls of Kronos' palace had exploded into a conflict that would reshape the very foundations of reality. The Titanomachy, as it would come to be known, was not merely a battle between opposing armies, but a fundamental struggle between two visions of divine rule, the old order of tyranny and fear, and the new promise of justice and freedom. From their stronghold atop Mount Olympus, Zeus and his siblings gazed out upon a cosmos divided against itself. The mountain they had claimed as their fortress rose higher than any peak on Earth, its summit piercing the very dome of the sky. Here, where the air was so thin that mortal lungs could not draw breath, the Olympians had established their war council, their voices carrying across dimensions as they planned the campaign that would determine the fate of all existence. The rescue of the Cyclopes and the Hundred-Handed Ones from the depths of Tartarus had proven to be the turning point that Zeus had hoped for. The three Cyclopes, Brontes, Steropes, and Arges had emerged from their prison with hearts burning for vengeance against the Titan who had condemned them to eons of darkness. Their gratitude to Zeus was matched only by their eagerness to turn their legendary craftsmanship toward the creation of weapons that could challenge the might of the Titans themselves. The Hundred-Handed Ones, or Hecatoncheires, were even more formidable allies. Cottus, Briareus, and Gyges possessed strength that defied comprehension, each of their 100 hands capable of hurling boulders the size of mountains with the speed of arrows. Their liberation had required Zeus to descend into the very heart of Tartarus, facing guardians and obstacles that would have destroyed lesser beings, but the alliance they brought to the Olympian cause was worth any risk. The Titans control the established order, Zeus declared as he addressed his war council, his voice carrying the weight of absolute conviction. They have the loyalty of those who benefit from the current system, the fear of those who dare not oppose them, and the advantage of defensive positions that have been fortified over eons. But we have something they lack, the righteousness of our cause and the desperate courage of those who fight for their very right to exist. Poseidon, his trident gleaming with the power of all the world's oceans, nodded grimly. "The seas are divided," he reported, his voice carrying the sound of crashing waves. "Oceanus commands the loyalty of most of the water spirits, but there are those among the nymphs and lesser sea gods who remember the cruelties they have witnessed. They will aid us when the time comes." Hades, lord of the underworld, though his realm was still contested, spoke with the finality of the grave. "The dead cry out for justice," he said, his words seeming to echo from vast depths. "Every soul that has perished under our father's reign adds their voice to our cause. The very earth itself rebels against his continued rule. But it was the report from Hera that carried the most troubling news. The other Titans are not united in their support for our father, she revealed, her regal bearing unchanged despite the dire circumstances. Many grow weary of his increasingly erratic behavior, but fear keeps them bound to his cause. If we could somehow break that fear, we might turn some of them to our side. The war that erupted across the cosmos was unlike anything that had come before. Battles raged not just on the surface of the earth, but in the depths of the oceans, in the spaces between the stars, and in dimensions that existed beyond mortal comprehension. The very elements themselves became weapons as the opposing forces clashed with powers that could reshape continents and redirect the courses of rivers. Zeus led the Olympian forces with a combination of strategic brilliance and personal courage that inspired even his most powerful allies. He fought not as a distant commander issuing orders from safety, but as a warrior king who shared every danger with his followers. His thunderbolts became legendary among both friend and foe, striking with such precision and power that even the mightiest titans learned to fear the sound of approaching thunder. The Cyclopes, working with desperate urgency in forges that burned with the heat of dying stars, created weapons that would become the stuff of legend. For Zeus, they crafted thunderbolts that could pierce any defense and strike with the speed of thought itself. For Poseidon, they forged a trident that could command the very foundations of the earth, causing earthquakes and tsunamis with a single gesture. For Hades, they created a helmet of invisibility that allowed him to move unseen through enemy territory, gathering intelligence and striking where least expected. But the Titans were not idle in the face of this rebellion. Kronos, driven to new heights of fury by his children's defiance, marshaled forces that seemed inexhaustible. Atlas, strongest of the Titans, led armies that could march across the sky itself. Prometheus, despite his growing doubts about the righteousness of their cause, used his gift of foresight to anticipate Olympian strategies. Epimetheus commanded legions of creatures born from the primordial chaos, beings of such alien nature that even the gods struggled to comprehend their true forms. The battles themselves were spectacles that defied description. When Zeus and Kronos clashed directly, their conflict generated storms that raged across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Lightning and temporal distortions warred against each other, creating pockets of space where time moved backward and others where it accelerated beyond measure. Mountains were born and destroyed in moments, while new stars blazed to life in the heavens, only to be extinguished by the fury of divine combat. Poseidon's battles with Oceanus turned the world's oceans into cauldrons of chaos. Tidal waves the size of mountain ranges crashed against shores that had stood unchanged since the dawn of time, while whirlpools opened that seemed to lead directly to the void between worlds. The very concept of water itself became a battlefield as the two ocean lords fought for dominion over the element that covered most of the Earth's surface. In the underworld, Hades waged a different kind of war, one fought in shadows and whispers. He moved through the realm of the dead like a ghost among ghosts, rallying the spirits of those who had suffered under Titan rule, and turning the very concept of death into a weapon against his enemies. When Titan warriors fell in battle, they found no rest in death, for Hades ensured that their spirits would rise again to fight for the Olympian cause. The 100-handed ones proved to be weapons of mass destruction in their own right. When they entered battle, the very landscape changed around them. Kronos could hurl 100 boulders simultaneously with such force that they created new mountain ranges where they landed. Briareus could grapple with entire armies at once, his 100 arms moving with such speed that they seemed to be everywhere at once. Gyges specialized in defensive warfare, his 100 hands weaving barriers of stone and metal that could withstand even the mightiest Titan assault. As the war raged on, it became clear that this was not merely a conflict between two generations of gods, but a fundamental transformation of the cosmic order. The very laws that governed reality were being rewritten with each battle, and the outcome would determine not just who ruled the heavens, but what kind of universe would emerge from the chaos. Cities of mortals cowered beneath skies that raged with divine fury, while the earth itself groaned under the weight of battles that shook its very foundations. The sun and moon fled their courses, seeking shelter from conflicts that threatened to tear apart the very fabric of space and time. In the depths of the ocean, sea creatures that had existed since the dawn of creation found themselves caught between forces that could boil the seas or freeze them solid with a gesture. But through it all, Zeus never lost sight of the ultimate goal. This was not a war of conquest or revenge, but a struggle for the right to create a better world. Every battle fought, every sacrifice made, every moment of suffering endured was in service of a vision of divine rule based on justice rather than fear, on wisdom rather than paranoia, on love rather than tyranny. The Titanomachy had begun, and the cosmos would never be the same again. Part 14. The Cyclops' Gift, Forging the Thunderbolt. In the deepest caverns beneath Mount Olympus, where the Earth's molten heart pulsed with primordial fire, the Cyclopes labored at their greatest work. The forge they had constructed defied mortal comprehension, a vast chamber carved from living rock, its walls lined with veins of precious metals that had never seen the light of day. Here, where the boundary between the physical and divine realms grew thin, Brontes, Steropes, and Arges worked with desperate urgency to create weapons that could tip the balance of the cosmic war. The three brothers were beings of immense power and ancient wisdom, their single eyes capable of perceiving the fundamental forces that held reality together. They had been among the first children of Gaia and Uranus, born with the divine gift of creation that allowed them to forge objects of unimaginable potency. But their talents had also been their curse, for Kronos had feared their abilities and condemned them to eons of imprisonment in the lightless depths of Tartarus. Now, freed by Zeus's courage and driven by their burning desire for vengeance, they poured all their skill and fury into the creation of weapons that would become legendary throughout the cosmos. The forge burned with fires that had been kindled at the birth of the universe itself, flames so hot they could melt the very essence of divinity and reshape it according to the craftsman's will. Brontes, master of thunder, worked at the great anvil with movements that seemed to dance in harmony with the rhythm of creation itself. His massive hammer, forged from the crystallized essence of sound itself, rang against the divine metals with notes that resonated through dimensions. Each strike sent shockwaves through the mountain, and the sparks that flew from his work became new stars that blazed to life in the heavens above. "Brother Zeus!" Brontes called out as the young god descended into the forge, his voice carrying the rumble of distant storms. "We have labored without rest since our liberation, and our work nears completion. But what we create here will be more than mere weapons. They will be extensions of your very essence, tools that will allow you to wield the fundamental forces of the cosmos itself." Zeus approached the forge with reverence, understanding that he was witnessing the birth of artifacts that would shape the destiny of all creation. The heat was so intense that even his divine form felt its effects, and the air itself seemed to crackle with barely contained power. But it was not the physical environment that awed him most. It was the sight of the Cyclopes themselves, their single eyes blazing with creative fire as they worked to forge the instruments of Kronos' downfall. Steropes, master of lightning, held up a partially completed thunderbolt for Zeus's inspection. The weapon was a thing of terrible beauty, its surface crackling with energies that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. It was not merely a spear or javelin, but a crystallized fragment of the storm itself, containing within its form the raw power of the tempest. "This is no ordinary weapon," Steropes explained, his voice carrying the sharp of lightning splitting the sky. "We have woven into its very essence the fury of the storm, the speed of thought, and the inevitability of justice itself. When you hurl this thunderbolt, it will not merely strike your enemy, it will carry with it the weight of divine law and the promise of cosmic order." Argus, master of brightness, worked at a separate anvil where he was crafting something that seemed to capture and concentrate the very essence of illumination. His creation pulsed with a light so pure and intense that it seemed to burn away shadows, not just from the physical world, but from the realm of possibility itself. "And this," Argus said, holding up his work with obvious pride, "will be the source of your lightning's brilliance. We have captured within this core the first light that ever shone in the cosmos, the illumination that drove back the primordial darkness and allowed creation to begin. Your thunderbolts will not merely destroy, they will illuminate truth and banish the shadows where tyranny hides." As Zeus watched the three brothers work, he began to understand the true magnitude of what they were creating. These were not simply weapons of war, but instruments of cosmic justice that would allow him to fulfill his destiny as the rightful king of the gods. The thunderbolts would be more than tools of destruction. They would be symbols of the new order he sought to establish, representations of power wielded in service of righteousness rather than tyranny. The forging process itself was a marvel to behold. The Cyclopes worked with materials that existed at the very edge of reality, fragments of crystallized time, essence of pure energy, and metals that had been born in the hearts of dying stars. They heated these impossible substances in fires that burned with the intensity of creation itself, then shaped them with tools that could manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe. Each thunderbolt was unique, crafted to serve a specific purpose in the cosmic war. Some were designed for maximum destructive power, capable of shattering mountains or boiling seas. Others were created for precision, able to strike a single target across vast distances without harming anything nearby. Still others were forged for symbolic impact, their very appearance designed to inspire terror in enemies and hope in allies. But the masterpiece of their work was the first thunderbolt, the one that would become Zeus's primary weapon and the symbol of his authority. This weapon incorporated elements from all three Cyclopes' specialties: Brontes's mastery of thunder, Steropes' command of lightning, and Argus's control of divine illumination. The result was a weapon that transcended the merely physical, existing simultaneously in multiple dimensions and carrying within its form the very essence of divine power. "This thunderbolt," Brontes explained as he made the final adjustments to the weapon, "will be bound to your very soul. It will respond not just to your conscious will, but to your deepest convictions about justice and righteousness. In the hands of a tyrant, it would be nothing more than a pretty ornament. But in your hands, it will become the instrument through which cosmic law itself is enforced." The moment when Zeus first grasped the completed thunderbolt was one that would echo through eternity. The weapon seemed to recognize its destined wielder, its surface blazing with light as it bonded with his divine essence. Power flowed between God and artifact, creating a connection that went beyond the merely physical to touch the very foundations of reality itself. Zeus felt the thunderbolt's power merging with his own, amplifying his natural abilities and granting him access to forces he had never imagined. He could sense the storm clouds gathering in response to his will, feel the lightning eager to answer his call, and perceive the cosmic order that his weapon was designed to protect and enforce. "With this gift," Zeus said, his voice carrying new depths of authority and power, "I swear to you that your imprisonment will be avenged, that justice will be restored to the cosmos, and that never again will tyranny hold dominion over the divine realm. The thunderbolt will be the symbol of a new age, one where power serves justice rather than the other way around." The Cyclopes bowed before their liberator, their single eyes blazing with satisfaction and hope. They had created more than weapons. They had forged the tools that would reshape the cosmos itself. The thunderbolts would carry Zeus's power to every corner of creation, announcing to all that the age of Kronos was ending and the age of the Olympians had begun. As Zeus emerged from the forge, the completed thunderbolt crackling with barely contained power in his grasp, he knew that the final phase of the war was about to begin. The weapon in his hands was more than a tool of destruction. It was a promise of justice, a symbol of hope, and the key to victory in the greatest conflict the cosmos had ever known. The storm was gathering, and Zeus was ready to unleash it upon his enemies with all the fury of divine justice itself. Part 15: Victory and the New Order. Zeus claims Mount Olympus. The final battle of the Titanomachy erupted across the heavens with a fury that threatened to tear apart the very fabric of existence. For 10 years the war had raged without decisive victory for either side, but now, with the thunderbolts of the Cyclopes crackling in his grasp, Zeus prepared to bring the cosmic conflict to its ultimate conclusion. The battlefield stretched across multiple dimensions, from the highest peaks of the celestial realm to the deepest abysses of Tartarus, as the forces of old and new order clashed in a struggle that would determine the fate of all creation. Kronos had marshaled every ally, every resource, every fragment of power at his disposal for this final confrontation. The Titan King stood at the center of his forces like a pillar of temporal might, his very presence warping the flow of time around him. Behind him arrayed the full might of the Titan host, Atlas bearing the weight of the sky itself as a weapon, Hyperion blazing with the light of 1,000 suns, Oceanus commanding tsunamis that could drown continents, and dozens of other primordial beings whose power had shaped the cosmos since its birth. But Zeus was no longer the hidden child who had fled his father's palace in the dark of night. He had grown into the fullness of his divine majesty, his form wreathed in lightning that danced around him like living serpents of pure energy. The thunderbolt in his hand pulsed with power that seemed to resonate with the very heartbeat of creation itself. And when he spoke, his voice carried the authority of one who had been chosen by fate itself to reshape the cosmic order. "Father!" Zeus called out across the battlefield, his words cutting through the chaos of divine combat like a blade of crystallized truth. "Your reign of terror ends today. Too long have you ruled through fear and paranoia. Too long have you denied justice to those who cry out for freedom. The cosmos itself demands change, and I am the instrument of that transformation." Kronos' response was a roar of fury that shattered mountains and boiled seas, his temporal powers lashing out in waves that sought to unmake his rebellious son from the very timeline of existence. But Zeus was ready for such attacks, his thunderbolt blazing with light that cut through the distortions of time like a sword through silk. The weapon that the Cyclopes had forged was more than a tool of destruction. It was an anchor point of cosmic law that could not be undone by any power, no matter how ancient or mighty. The battle between father and son became the focal point around which the entire war revolved. Their clash sent shockwaves through every dimension of reality, creating new stars with each exchange of blows and opening rifts in space that would become the pathways between worlds. Zeus's thunderbolt struck with the precision of divine justice, each one carrying not just destructive force, but the weight of cosmic law itself. Kronos fought back with the desperate fury of a tyrant who saw his empire crumbling, wielding time as both weapon and shield in a display of power that would have awed even the primordial forces that had shaped the universe. Around them, the greater battle raged with equal intensity. Poseidon had finally overcome Oceanus, his trident proving superior to his uncle's ancient authority over the waters. The seas themselves seemed to celebrate this victory, their waves carrying the songs of liberation to every shore. Hades had emerged from the underworld with an army of the grateful dead, spirits who had suffered under Titan rule, and now fought with the fury of the wronged, seeking justice. The hundred-handed ones proved to be the decisive factor in many of the smaller engagements. Their ability to hurl mountains with the speed of arrows and grapple with entire armies simultaneously turned the tide in battle after battle. Kronos alone accounted for the defeat of 3 lesser Titans, his 100 hands moving with such coordination that he seemed to be fighting a dozen separate battles at once. But it was the defection of Prometheus that truly marked the beginning of the end for the Titan cause. The far-seeing Titan, whose gift of prophecy had shown him the inevitable outcome of the war, abandoned his brothers and threw his support behind Zeus. His knowledge of Titan strategies and weaknesses proved invaluable, allowing the Olympians to anticipate and counter moves that might otherwise have prolonged the conflict for eons. "I have seen the future," Prometheus declared, as he knelt before Zeus in the midst of battle, "and in it I see a cosmos ruled not by fear, but by wisdom, not by tyranny, but by justice. I choose to stand with the righteous, whatever the cost to myself." The tide of battle turned decisively when Zeus, drawing upon the full power of his thunderbolts, managed to strike Kronos with a blow that shattered the Titan King's temporal defenses. The weapon, forged with the essence of cosmic law itself, proved capable of piercing even the most fundamental powers of the old order. Kronos staggered, his control over time wavering for the first time in eons, and in that moment of weakness, Zeus pressed his advantage. "Your time is over, Father," Zeus declared, his voice carrying the finality of divine judgment. "You sought to prevent the prophecy through cruelty and murder, but the fates cannot be denied. I am your successor, chosen not by birth alone, but by the righteousness of my cause and the justice of my rule." The final thunderbolt that Zeus hurled at his father was not aimed to kill, for even in his righteous fury, the young god understood that some lines should not be crossed. Instead, it was designed to bind and imprison, to remove Kronos from power without destroying him entirely. The weapon struck true, wrapping the Titan King in chains of crystallized lightning that could not be broken by any force in creation. With their leader defeated and bound, the remaining Titans found their resistance crumbling. Some, like Atlas, were condemned to eternal punishment for their crimes. The mighty Titan was sentenced to bear the weight of the heavens upon his shoulders for all eternity, a reminder of the price of supporting tyranny. Others, who had shown mercy or wisdom during their rule, were allowed to retain lesser positions in the new cosmic order, their power curtailed, but their existence preserved. The victory celebration that followed was unlike anything the cosmos had ever witnessed. From the highest peaks of Mount Olympus to the deepest valleys of the earth, the news of Zeus's triumph spread like wildfire. Mortals who had cowered beneath skies torn by divine warfare emerged to find the heavens calm and bright. The very elements themselves seemed to rejoice, with flowers blooming out of season and springs of pure water bubbling up from barren ground. Zeus stood atop Mount Olympus, his siblings arrayed around him like the points of a divine constellation, and formally claimed his throne as king of the gods. The mountain itself seemed to respond to his presence, its peak rising even higher into the heavens as if reaching toward the stars themselves. Here, in this place where earth touched sky, the new order would be established. "Let it be known throughout all creation," Zeus proclaimed, his voice carrying to every corner of the cosmos, "that the age of tyranny has ended and the age of justice has begun. We who rule from Olympus do so not as tyrants who demand submission, but as guardians who protect the innocent and uphold the law. Let the cosmos flourish under our guidance, and let all beings know that they need no longer live in fear." The division of the cosmos among the victorious siblings was accomplished with wisdom and fairness that stood in stark contrast to the arbitrary cruelties of the previous age. Zeus claimed dominion over the sky and the heavens, his thunderbolts ensuring that his authority would be respected throughout the celestial realm. Poseidon was granted lordship over all the waters of the earth, from the mightiest oceans to the smallest streams. Hades, though his realm was dark and somber, accepted rulership of the underworld with the understanding that death was as necessary and natural as life itself. Hera, Demeter, and Hestia were granted their own spheres of influence, their wisdom and compassion ensuring that the new order would be guided by more than mere power. The cosmos was divided not through conquest or arbitrary decree, but through careful consideration of each god's nature and abilities. As the sun set on the first day of the new age, Zeus stood alone atop his mountain throne, gazing out at a cosmos transformed. The war was over, the victory was complete, and the future stretched ahead like an unwritten scroll, waiting to be filled with the deeds of gods and mortals alike. The hidden child who had once cowered in a cave had become the king of all creation, and under his rule, the cosmos would know peace, justice, and prosperity for ages to come. The age of the Olympians had begun, and with it, a new chapter in the eternal story of divine rule had opened. Zeus had claimed not just a throne, but the responsibility to ensure that power would never again be wielded in service of tyranny and fear. The thunderbolt in his hand was no longer just a weapon of war, but a symbol of the justice that would guide his reign for all eternity. The cosmos was reborn, and Zeus was its king,